So let's start off, and I want to actually start with giving you a little bit of a bigger picture here, because last week you learned about cryptography, and cryptography provides assurances about the conduct of machines, how cryptographic primitives work, and they are mostly reliant on mathematics. So therefore, they are kind of objective in nature. And they promote mostly deterministic actions. Of course, if you want to have some randomness, which we heard, then that's different. But mostly it is about deterministic actions of computers or algorithms. And this serves as a toolbox to secure certain actions in the digital world. On the other hand, we have economics that offers predictions or explanations about how people behave. And this is intrinsically subjective because humans are humans, and we can try to have models about their behavior and try to model their behavior. But at the end, humans are very complex, and it's often just like an estimation of maybe a big group of humans will interact. So it's intrinsically subjective, and it's driven by individual preferences. And we will have a chapter about incentives. Those can be financial incentives, but there are also different incentives at play. And economics serves as a toolbox to understand which actions humans are likely to undertake. And if you think about the example in cryptography, where you have some commit reveal scheme, then from the cryptographic side, everything is bulletproof, right? You commit to something, you can reveal it later. And cryptographically, this whole process is kind of bulletproof. But then if you actually think about the application in real life, questions arise like, why should anybody reveal? Imagine you have an auction where somebody commits to some bid, but then they find out that they lose, and they might influence the auction by not revealing, right? And there, often cryptography doesn't give you an answer, right? There, you actually need economics to step in and create incentives around these paradigms to make sure that they are actually working once you include humans into the picture. So what I want to say here is that both are working very nicely together, but cryptography would be kind of meaningless without humans actually using it, right? As maybe if AI takes over at some point, that might be different. But right now, without humans, there would be no real need for cryptography. But they are in great symphony with each other because, where cryptography has boundaries, economics offers solutions, and of course, the other way around. And together, they, offer a great toolbox to build unstoppable systems and unstoppable programs, which we are interested in. So why are economic concepts important to be taught here? So they help you to make better decisions in daily and in professional life. So we will see throughout the course that in many situations people are not behaving optimally, and I hope, or I'm certain that we will see this also in class. And knowing about these concepts can help you to make better decisions. And of course, this also translates to professional life when you're designing your startup or when you're designing some protocol. It is also important to understand the limits of these concepts, which I'm also making sure to always show you that there's some, theoretic solution when you make certain assumption about humans, but then in reality, there might be situations where they don't hold, or there might be situations where they actually pretty good hold. And it's actually important to understand when we are in which domain here. It is also important to model and reason about the behavior of other people, right? So if you interact with other people, it's very important to have these concepts to get a better idea about their decision making. And that's what I said. And especially in the context of Web3, economics is, because we often want to build trustless systems, it's very important that we have the economics in place, because many social factors that normally guide the behavior of humans are kind of falling behind, because you want to have anonymity, or you allow everybody to participate without some other filtering process. So here the economic incentives are very important to have aligned that these systems work nicely. So let's talk briefly about the outline of this course. So we will first talk about incentives, which are a key factor in economics. So what motivates others to do things, what motivates people to do things. Then we have a small part about demand and supply, about market equilibrium influences on these demand and supply and elasticity. Then we will talk briefly about different market forms, so monopolies, oligopolies, and the perfect competition. Then we will talk about the economics of specialization, where I think one of the important concepts is the comparative advantage and opportunity costs that actually lead to this benefit of specialization and the gains from trade. Then we have another small part about the time as ultimate resource, the interaction between time and value, which is a little bit philosophical maybe, but it's not a big topic, but I think it's still very important to have heard. And at the end, we will talk about behavioral biases, so where human decision-making might be different than traditional economic theories predict. And my background is actually in behavioral economics, so I wanted to include this topic because it turns out to be very interesting also for students. And we will have like some workshops where we'll actually see a lot of this stuff happening. Then we will have discussions and workshops. There will be some discussions. I will, give you an open question, and we can discuss that in the classroom and apply the concepts that we learned. And there will also be hands-on applications, which I hope will be interesting to you. So we will play economic games with each other where you can actually earn money, so real money. And these games are designed to foster some additional knowledge about the concepts that we learned, right? So the games are actually mapping some of the stuff that we learned, and then we can actually see how people in reality behave and discuss this a little bit. All right, so let's start. When we talk about human behavior, we have to talk about incentives, and there's a nice quote from Stephen Levitt that says, an incentive is a bullet, a key, an often tiny object with astonishing power to change a situation. And this is a very important part because it doesn't always need to be a big incentives. There can be like these nuanced design choices that actually change the behavior of people. So when we talk about incentives, they are of course important to motivate individuals or a whole group of individuals to perform certain actions. And historically, they were designed to influence human behavior both on the macroeconomic level. So macroeconomic level is like, societies or like big markets, but also on the microeconomic level when, we talk about individuals or the interaction between two individuals with each other. Not most commonly, people, when they hear incentives, they refer to money, which fall under the umbrella of extrinsic incentives. But not all the incentives are monetary. There are different incentives that drive human behavior, and we will see a few of those too. So when we talk about different types of economic incentives, in a workplace and situation is a very important and very common part of it. And this is basically the microeconomic level. So if you have employees working or if you are an employer, and they are often motivated by various forms of economic incentives, especially extrinsic incentives. There's the flat rate. So that is basically a fixed amount of salary irrespective of the performance. Then we have the the piece rate, where we pay based on the quantity of output produced. We have a bonus often that additionally rewards for excellent performance. And we have relative incentives, rewards that are relative to the performance of others. So they are competitive incentives. Just a quick question, who here ever had a flat rate as compensation scheme as an employee? Yeah, okay, I guess most of you when you did work. Who had here a piece rate? Yes, for example, can you tell us what kind of piece rate you had? Maybe give him the mic.
So in my college days, like I was to share this side. So in my college days, I was doing some graphic designing work. So based on like number of arts produced, maybe using AI or whatever, like based on that, like it was.
So, and it was purely the number of pieces?
Yeah, because like the theme was very standard and the
Okay.
organization was quite old. So
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that is a good hint because piece rates are especially pronounced like in the industrial revolution where factory workers were basically producing like some good that is very nicely measurable, and you could actually have two people compete with each other, and you actually see this one person built 10 nail clips and the other one built 12. So obviously you could like compensate them per nail clip. This changed a little bit with the digitalization and like more creative work because it's much harder to just pay for quantity, right? Because the quality has become so important. So we generally see a decline in like the piece rate. So not very often people are just paid for the pure output. Who here had bonus as an incentive scheme? Okay, yeah. So bonus is a very often used incentive scheme. Who had so when you get some additional money based on some performance, and then you have some performance evaluation, and it is a very nice way to actually incentivize people. For example, also in companies where they give you shares, and like collectively you are interested in increasing the share price, which generally is regarded as having beneficial actions towards the company. Who here had relative incentives? Yes, maybe you can explain what was it?
Yeah, this was tracked as part of the bonus component. So there was a component where it was relative to your position as compared to your peers. So if you're in the top 10%,
Yeah.
your bonus was commensurate with that particular percentage.
Yeah. Do you like felt what was the benefit of this, or also the disadvantages?
I guess from a benefit perspective, when you're competing with your peers, there's an incentive to increase your output. You're driven potentially for, I guess, higher than if you're not compared because there's no, I guess, it's difficult to then see to determine where your performance should be. Whereas if you're competing with someone else, you've got that extra drive.
Yeah.
But from I guess, a behavioural perspective, it can be a disadvantage because you are effectively competing with your peers. So there could be some sort of disharmony in the workplace as a result of this competitive nature.
Yeah, that's a very good part. So on the benefit side, you don't have to like as an employer, you don't have to have like a good idea about where the performance should be because you can expect that you will find out by comparing the different individuals with each other, and then you can decide. You only have to decide how much you want to pay in general, but then the performance levels you will find out through the competition, through the tournament. But we don't see these kind of incentives too often because they have like big drawbacks, of course. The first one you mentioned is basically people start, to sabotage their fellow employees or their co-workers, and they try to diminish the performance of the other ones, so their performance relatively is higher. And there's also another problem where employees could collude with each other and basically collectively reduce the performance to keep the ratio between each other the same. And so they don't need to work that much, but they get the full bonus or the same bonus as before. Yes.
So incentives, that's a very good point, that relative incentives do promote sabotage and rivalry, but they can also be used in different departments. Like when there's always rivalry between developers and QAs. So what we used to do is if a QA finds a really good bug, they get free lunch. And then developer doesn't has to take them on lunch. The management has to, because they have saved the effort and the developers get um, more respect because they now understand the QA better.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, one more question maybe.
So I'm not sure where to put it. I'm a little confused between bonus and like relative incentives. So when I was working at a company, like what they used to do is, for example, if someone has done exceptionally good at a particular thing as compared, matlab, like it is also as compared to others, because for example, there's different departments and everyone is working together, 20 people team. So if someone has done a great workshop, or someone has done given a great session, someone had cracked a great deal, someone had delivered the product in 7 days instead of 14. So then there were some additional rewards for them. So was it considered as a bonus or relative incentives? Because others don't get it, and everyone is trying to do
yeah.
better in their own lines.
I think the question is whether the budget for the bonus was fixed or not. Because if it wasn't kind of fixed and you just pay everybody that makes
Yeah.
a good workshop, then it's like a bonus.
Okay.
But if it was fixed, then your workshop basically reduced the budget for somebody else to be
Not fixed.
taken, right?
Yeah, so it will.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, maybe one more question.
So I work in a company. So my name is Joseph. I work in a company that we had like a collective bonus that we didn't mention here. But to be honest, well, was perhaps a motivation for the whole company, but it was an individual. We didn't talk that here.
But what did you say? It was a motivation for the company, but not
no,
for the
for individual. It was like collective motivation. So
Yeah.
so it was like at the end of the year, depending of how the company would go, that the bonus it would be equally for all the employees.
Okay, yeah. So if it's equally, then there's no competition, right? Then it's like just a general bonus. Yeah. I think I even heard some companies, but I don't think it really sticked. But some companies basically giving a bonus to a team, and then the team themselves have to decide how to allocate it within the team. But that also sounds like it could create a lot of problems. So we don't see that too much. Okay, so one very important aspect in economics is rationality. And in economic theories, at least in the traditional theories, we often assume rationality. And this implies that actors, so the individuals that we are looking at, are primarily driven by monetary gains. So they want to maximize their payout or payoff. And they act purely in self-interest. So they are only interested about their own payout. And they have unlimited cognitive resources to process all the available options and then pick the best one and the option that actually maximizes your payout. And as a remark in this, all factors can be translated into monetary payout, right? So if you think about whether you want to make holidays in Spain for 2 weeks and drink wine, you have to compare that to go 2 weeks to Germany and drink beer. And you cannot really, like an economic agent doesn't know how to process this, but they would basically translate the payout of doing that to a single dimension, to money or to utility, which we'll see later, and then simply pick the highest one. Yeah, so incentives often work very well, of course. They are a powerful tool to shift human behavior. One big example is, of course, the interest rate set by central banks, where often the market actually reacts so quickly that even before the press release is there, the market's already reacted because some people are actually listening into the live conversation and then actually trading for it. One example is if they lower the rates, which encourages borrowing and investing, or if there are higher rates, which should slow down inflation and stabilize the economy. But then also incentives can backfire a lot if they are not very well designed. One example is in India, during British rule, the British government was concerned about the large number of venomous cobras. And they tried to think about how they could get rid of it, and they simply put a bounty for each dead cobra. And people could basically kill the cobra, hand it in, and get some money for it. What do you think happened? Somebody need a mic? Maybe there.
that people started breeding cobras and selling them?
Yeah, of course. That was the design, right? Like, but can you see any drawback that could have arisen there?
Probably that at some point when, if the program ended, you had a bunch of cobras around because so many were breeding.
Breed it, yeah, that's a good point. So people actually started to breed cobras at home to sell them, right? I mean, it's obvious. You just breed them at home. You have a nice cash cow. You just give it to the British, and they pay you. So then finally, the British found out about this, and they said, "Well, okay, this is not working. We're going to stop this program." So they stopped the program. The cobras became worthless. So the people all released the cobras because they couldn't do anything with them. And it is said that there were more cobras after this whole thing than before. And of course, the British lost a lot of money because they had to pay for a substantial time for the dead cobras. And this is a little bit going into the Goodhart's law, which says that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure, right? Like it's people find some way to rig the system and to basically circumvent this. Mike, yes.
Just quickly, put this sentence on the previous example, like what is the measure, what is the target?
So the measure is how many dead cobras there are, and the target is to maximize it, right? You want to have as many dead cobras as possible, so people find a way to maximize it, and that's like basically.
And like how, in this case, how did the measure become the target? So, so the measure is how many dead cobras someone brings, right? The target is dead cobras, and therefore they're the same.
I'm not sure what you mean. I think, basically you just you want to have dead cobras, and people, the idea is that you go out into the wild and get the cobras removed.
Yeah.
That is actually a problem, right? But on the other hand, they just breeded them.
Yeah, I get this. I just want to see how the next quote maps exactly onto this.
Okay, maybe it doesn't perfectly, but it's the quote is related to the whole, it's an economic, it's not based on this.
I get it.
It's motivated by this, but
Yeah.
it doesn't perfectly map. Or maybe
Okay.
we can talk about this after when we can dissect and. Okay, yeah.
Yes, I have another example for this, for devs specifically. If a company, for example, said that the measure, that the test coverage is 95%, and so this is a measure and it becomes a target. So, if it's hard to achieve it, devs just start writing any shit tests to reach the target, and it doesn't make what we need.
That's another good point, yeah. Okay, then let's...
Excuse me?
Yes, where?
Yeah. So the measure actually is trying to pay out for every dead cobra, which became the target when people started breeding and getting money for a dead cobra, not from the wild, but from the house. So it's a measure that Britishers were trying to take, which became the target.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about crowding out. Who's here from? We have people from Israel here? Okay. Okay. So in Haifa, parents often got their kids late from daycare, and I don't know if you can, after I told this, confirm. It's a study from 2000. Actually, it's quite a long time ago. But of course, this caused childcare workers a lot of frustration because they needed to stay longer. They didn't know when they could go home, and it was quite frustrating. So actually, two researchers had some idea, and the economic way would be to fine parents for getting their kids late, right? Just punish them and have them pay. The program was then rolled out in some of the daycares, but not in others. So they made an experiment. So they had some daycares where they left everything alone, and in other ones they introduced this fine, and then they could compare the two different, or the multiple different daycares with each other. And the benefit is that differences in time shouldn't explain the result, because you had also daycares in the same time without this fine. What do you think happened? Yes.
people who are in daycares with fines, they move the children to the daycares without fines.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
The people move their children to the daycares without
Ah.
fines.
I don't think, no, they didn't. No, that was too complicated. I don't even know whether that's possible. So just one quick, so the traditional economic theory would say that you have less or at least as equally many late parents, right? Like maybe at least as equally. So if the fine is not high enough and people just don't care about it, or the fine works and people actually show up and finally get their kids from daycare.
Maybe like because they were fined, they had to work harder, and then they were even more late. I don't know.
They were even more?
They were even they would arrive even later.
Okay,
get
so
the
you
kids
say
because they were fined, so they I don't know.
well,
Because
I mean,
I'm just expecting like the opposite. Like,
yeah. I mean, it's kind of obvious, right? But the mechanism is the question. But in your case, why should they work harder to pay the fine? They could just get their kids, right?
Yeah,
And not pay the
or
fine.
maybe they can't, like they're already working hard and therefore they can't get their kids in
Okay.
time, and then they get fined, so they need to work even longer. It's kind of not likely that people have jobs that are so granular, but yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. I'm not sure whether the researchers actually looked in this mechanism. Some other idea here? Yes, maybe there.
It looks like how you're setting up the question, it looks like people were actually willing to pay the fine, so they do not get their kids back and they have some extra time for themselves. So I would still say the fine was maybe low, not high enough.
Yeah. Okay, so
Sorry.
that's true.
Maybe I'll Anta. So in my perspective, it is this like when we don't give in a fine. So if we late like getting our kids, it's kind of that we have a faults with our kids. But whereas the fine is happening, we have tendencies that say that as long as I giving a fine, I'm okay. So maybe like psychological acceptance or make everything right because there is a model that I find and then I'm okay. So not fall with my kids, but I just good with the school.
Yeah, that's true. So of course the opposite happened. Actually, the number of late parents even increased. So in these daycares where the parents were late, even more parents were late and even later. And it's exactly this mechanism that in the if you get your kid late, it's kind of embarrassing and you made a mistake. But once there is a fine, it's basically a price, right? You just pay the fine and you feel good about yourself. And hey, like 1 hour late is like $20. Now today it's actually worth it. And this basically showed the crowding out effect. So there was some intrinsic motivation, some social motivation for the parents to get the kids on time. But once you implement an economic incentive, people just took it as a price and said, okay, I'm willing to pay 20 I don't know, shekels, I think, for getting it late. Yeah, okay. So, and another interesting part is that, so they abolished this, right? They abolished the fine, but parents were still late more. So actually this program created some social norm where it's actually fine to get the kid late, and this kind of embarrassment didn't really come back, at least for some time. Crowding out because there's an intrinsic motivation that you want to get your kid, then an extrinsic motivation comes and it's like pushing the intrinsic motivation out, and it is replaced by the intrinsic motivation, by the extrinsic motivation, and this is just a price. Yeah. There's another study also in Israel where maybe you can confirm this. There's high school kids going from door to door, like fundraising. I think it's once per year. And these researchers, the same researchers, separate them into 3 groups. There was a control group, so there was nothing, it was just normal, like always. In the one group, they gave a low pay. I think they are selling cards or something. So for each card that they sold, they got a very small compensation, you know, like very small one. And then there was another group with a high pay where when you sold the card, you got a very nice bonus in a way, or a piece rate actually. So what do you think the outcome here was? Performed the best? Okay.
You know, we can't hear you. Please use the mic.
Like I would assume, just because we're expecting unexpected results. But yeah, the ones with the small pay, not no pay, but with a small pay, would like for them to do a lot of small ones is the ones with the high pay were like, okay, we did 2, 3, okay, now we can go have pizza and that's it. Like, and the ones with the small pay were motivated somewhat, but still not enough to call it a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how would you rank them? Control group, low pay, high pay. Who did the most and who did the least?
Probably like low pay, and again, there's a social factor there, which is like depending on I did it as a kid also, and I was encouraged to from like a moral perspective.
Okay, nice.
But yeah, so I would say this small pay, no pay, and high pay.
Okay. Who thinks otherwise?
No pay, small pay, high pay.
No pay,
Yeah,
small
no pay
pay,
did the
high
best.
pay. And no pay is the highest performance?
Yes.
Okay. Who thinks otherwise? There. Maybe one more. You need a mic, I think.
There's just a mic in that section.
Yeah, there should be a mic there.
Do all of them know each other's payment?
I think they set it up in a way that the groups didn't know about the other groups.
Got it. This is a question. Thanks.
Okay, so what actually happened is that those in the high pay group did the most. Then there was the control group, and then there was the low pay. So actually by paying people or students, they actually work less if you don't pay them enough. And the paper actually, the paper's name is Pay Enough or Don't Pay at All. And what happened here is that, as you said, you were morally incentivized to do it. And if you didn't get a lot of money, you were not. So that is a hypothesis of the authors, that you're not able to signal to the outside that you do it because you want to do it, because you want to do good, right? So you cannot distinguish yourself from those people that just do it for the money. And if you don't pay enough, you're not really motivated. If you pay enough, of course, at some point, the intrinsic motivation kicks in, right? I mean, if you pay some ridiculous amount of money per card, I mean, of course, everybody tries to sell as many cards as possible. Yes, one question up here.
Okay. Mario is my name. How do you know what is enough?
Yeah, well, you have to find out, right? I mean, if you want to do it scientifically, of course, you would have a lot of groups and a lot of pays, and then you can just plot the performance level, and at some point you will see that the performance goes down, and then at some point it goes up again, right? And you want to find the sweet spot, and of course, then you would also need to include the how much it costs you, and at some point maybe it's just best to not pay at all, because you need to pay so much that it's actually not worth anymore.
Yeah.
Right? But you could do an experiment, have a lot of groups, a lot of observations, and a lot of different pays.
Okay, thanks.
One more.
So yeah, I think like the design of the experiment is slightly problematic because there's all experiments in economics, like there's a lot of variables that you can control. And in this case specifically, kids from like higher socioeconomic background would be maybe less motivated than kids from lower backgrounds, because with kids it's hard because they're not really like purely economically motivated, because they have their parents and they're not like rational actors in the sense that like we usually, because when we talk about paying people, we talk about paying adults,
Yeah.
and
Well, I think that's actually not true, because experiments are perfect to counter these kind of things, because you would randomize the students, right? If you have 1,000 students, you would randomize them into 3 groups, and like the idea is that you will end up with the same amount of students from a higher level, from a higher income level and a lower income level in all the groups, right? If you have enough of students. I mean, this is actually true if you have 3 groups and like 5 students per group, right? Then
But
it by
could be that,
accident.
like, already the groups themselves, because I don't know if they had control over how they group the people, the kids, because
Well,
the
they did
kids,
it randomly. You have to do it randomly.
okay.
Because if the scientists would do it, then you could never really trust them that they are not designing it in a way that they find the
I mean,
results.
you
that they-
review the experiment, you see how they did
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
I
that's-
would just say that like it's possible, because if they didn't have control on designing the groups, then the groups are defined by the school, then maybe
Yeah.
the school is already like a
Yeah.
school for higher
Right.
socioeconomic class.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is also why in these kind of studies, they will always show descriptive information about the different groups. So for example, the age, and then you would expect that the average age is the same in all groups. Then you know that, and
But not the socioeconomic background.
but you can also have that, right?
Maybe.
But
The question
it's true.
is-
If you have enough people and you randomize, then this shouldn't matter. But if you have 3 people per group, and by accident, even if you randomize, in one group there's like 3 rich kids, then of course that might not work. And this is actually what drives the
Do you
result.
have the paper?
They have a paper, yeah. It's Gnisi and Rusticini. I can link it to you after. Okay, let's continue. So the power of intrinsic motivation or intrinsic incentives. So beyond monetary gain, people are also motivated by intrinsic factors, and that's what we saw before. There are social preferences. In traditional economic theory, there was not a lot of place for this, but with behavioral economics, new theories arise which actually take this into account. So there's reciprocity, right? When I help you, you help me. There's fairness. You want some allocation to be fair, and you're actually willing to give up some money so that some other person also has money. Social norms, as in the example with the daycare, where you could, there was a social norm just not to get your kid late, which was actually able to be manipulated. And then inequality aversion, where some people really just don't like situations where there's a high difference in inequality, maybe in income, and they are actually willing to reduce this inequality by giving up money themselves, which is not really explainable in traditional economics. And altruism, which is a very strong paradigm, I would say, that people are actually just donating money and don't get anything from it, right? Like, it's not about donating money and getting on stage and said I donated, but like donating anonymously and never tell anybody about it or something. Then there's also personal morals and deeply held beliefs. And yeah, as I said, economic models often fail to account for these motivations, leading to unexpected outcomes in the real world. And there's like countless papers where you have like a prediction from economics, from traditional economics, and you just don't find that in the data. But what is important is that the digital age emphasizes the importance, again, of these financial incentives, especially with automated actors in our economic systems, where, for example, algorithm and bots respond to incentives, are actually programmed to respond to incentives, and they are mostly financial ones automatically. There's also, some ways of, for example, reputation scores, in ways where you just cannot fix anything with financial incentives. There's still reputation. And this, of course, was always kind of important. There were bots around for quite some time now, but the increased digitalization, makes it much more easy for everybody to have some bot, or like with ChatGPT, I guess many people would be able to program something like this. And at some point we might, see situations where your electric car is an economic agent and is programmed to, maybe if you tell it to be fast from A to B, it might pay to get more green light or something, right? you could think of many interesting things like this. So yeah, this shifts the application of incentives beyond the human context into the realm of digital systems and automated processes. So as a conclusion, incentives continue to be fundamental to interactions in society, of course, whether among humans or between automated systems. And then as we understand more about incentives in different contexts, we can better design them and influence behavior effectively. So if you think about your application or the interaction between humans, it's always important to look in the broader perspective and design them properly. And whenever you have a lot of humans interacting with each other, in some collectives, for example, then intrinsic motivations remain important. But yeah, in certain contexts like automated systems, monetary incentives are, a significant role. And in general, the challenge is to balance these factors and achieve the desired outcome. So let's go to the next chapter, the demand and supply, the pillars of market equilibrium. And there basically the question is, a famous artist dies and her art increases in price, or in an unusually nice summer, hotel prices are reduced in popular vacation destinations. The question is, why is that? And it's a common model to help predict and rationalize the price which emerges from a market. And it can be used to guesstimate the quantity of produced goods versus their market prices. And one fundamental principle here is the law of demand. So when the price increases, the quantity demanded for the good generally decreases. Does somebody know any exceptions to this? Luxury goods? Yeah. That's true. Do you know the name? No. Name all the luxury brands now. No, I'm just kidding. Do you know the name of the goods? How are they called economically? Does somebody know? Rare? Rare? No. There's a special name for it. Mike?
Non-elastic goods?
No.
Elastic?
No. We will talk about that, but that's not. They are called Veblen goods. So these are goods where the demand actually increases if the price increases, and those are mostly luxury goods. But it's not a violation of this principle, because the utility of this good, what the good gives you, changes, right? Because most of the time you show it around, you have some reputational gain because of it, and only because the price increased. But yeah, I mean, generally, and I think this holds for almost all goods, let's say, the quantity demanded decreases if the price increases. Veblen. Veblen, it's V-E-B-L-E-N. E-B-L-E-N. Veblen, with a V. Veblen.
We should
Exactly.
not forget about Bitcoin and all the cryptocurrencies.
Where the demand increases when the price increases?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
FOMO.
What?
FOMO is
FOMO?
the intrinsic behavioral motivations of people. When the cryptocurrency increases, we have FOMO, and then that usually creates the demand among retail investors.
That's also interesting, yeah. Yeah, we will talk about that actually later in the behavioral economics part. Yeah, good part. Okay, let's visualize this, and this is how economists would do it. For example, here we have the demand for ice creams, the scoops sold on the x-axis, on the y-axis we have the price. And as we can see, if the price is very high, let's say 3 euros, nobody wants to buy the ice cream. There's no ice cream sold. And then, of course, the demand increases in the price. Decreases in the price. So, for example, if the ice cream is for free, 0, then 18 scoops are sold. Let's say there's only a limited amount of people, and once they have 18 ice creams, they just don't want to have any more. And ice cream is very hard to transport and sell somewhere else. So you can make some reasonable assumptions why there's actually some limit at 0 here. And now the question is, what influences this curve, right? Like, which influences are there to change the demand for this? Any ideas? Aside from price, of course.
Yeah, Mauricio, quality of the product or the service being offered.
Yeah, like the demand, basically the size of the consumer base, you mean?
Yeah, I'm saying like the quality of the service or the product.
The quality. Yeah. If the preferences of the consumers, right? Like if they want ice more, then yes. If they are willing to pay more, yeah.
Maybe season as well, eh?
The season, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the size of the consumer base in a way. So that's what else? Yeah.
I don't know if I'm correct, but it's not also related to the quantity of the product that you have available for a certain population. I mean, if I have only 10 ice cream for 1,000 people.
Yeah, there's like this. So if we assume that through some exogenous factor, there's suddenly a lot of ice cream here, right? Then that would actually increase the demand by reducing the price, because like there's so much available, right? And then by reducing the price, it would increase the demand, yeah. But for example, also average disposable income of the consumer base, right? If the people just have more money to spend, they might want to spend it on ice cream. What else? One very important thing? Yes?
I'm not 100% sure if this is the important factor, but it's a factor nonetheless I want to get away. Brand loyalty. So, for example, if someone prefers Ben & Jerry's ice cream or Dairy Queen ice cream, both American brands for context, they would more or less go after those brands rather than any other brands that they aren't aware about or don't have a preference for.
Yeah, no, that's right. So preference for the good, right? And this can be changed by, for example, advertising. But another factor is quite important. Yes.
Substitute.
Yeah, that's right. So she said substitute. So price of substitution goods, right? So in this example, maybe frozen yogurt would be a substitute, and imagine there's some price, frozen yogurt decreases in price quite a lot, then people would just demand less ice cream and go buy some frozen yogurt. And this we also talked about, the preferences within the consumer base, which can be, changed by advertising, by making the good appeal more. So these are the things that actually move the demand curve. So, like if the consumer base grows, then this whole thing shifts to the side, and in general, like more goods can be sold. And this would also, if we later look at the supply, this would increase the price. This would increase the demand, and therefore the profit would be higher from the firm.
Does this also count in the digital world? Because I remember what Amazon was doing. They were looking for the long tail. So they looked at the demand and they said, well, we have a lot of books where the demand is not so high. So we do that. And the sale went up because they were focusing on, the long tail.
I think that is an interesting example. We will also see that later in the market forms. I think Google has a very high impact on the market, so they can basically very easily influence the market with exercising their market power, right? So they were actually able to very easily change that. Yes, Andrew? Oh, I do a break in 5 minutes or now? Okay, in 5 minutes. So let's talk briefly about the law of supply, which is the other side of the coin. And there generally, if the price of a good increases, the quantity supplied also increases. Well, and the mechanism is quite obvious because suppliers can make more profit, so they would produce more. And here is where actually market demand and supply meet. So we can have these two curves. The demand is falling and the supply is increasing. And if we know the preferences of the consumer base, we can plot these two things. And then we can find the equilibrium price. In that regard, it would be that the scoops would be offered for €2 and they would be sold at, and then 7 scoops would be sold. And when what happens if if the price is higher than the equilibrium price, then there's more supply than demand. And then some goods remain unsold. And then actually sellers would be forced to reduce the price to get actually rid of their remaining stock, right? So we would converge again to the equilibrium price. And if the price is lower, there's more demand than supply. And this leads to a shortage of the goods. Like there's more people want to buy the good than there's available. So then the suppliers could just increase the price and make more profit. So we are always converging to this equilibrium price. Let's talk briefly about elasticity. I think somebody mentioned that before. Or actually, let's do the break before that. All right, so let's continue with elasticity. That is something a colleague asked before. And elasticity measures how much buyers and sellers respond to changes in market conditions. And the sensitivity of quantity demanded or supplied to changes in price. So a high elasticity means a small price change have large impact on quantity demanded or supplied. And a low elasticity, which is also means like inelastic, price changes do not affect quantity demanded or supplied so much. Do you have examples for these two kinds of goods? Yes? Maybe with the mic.
Oil is inelastic, right?
Yeah. What is it?
Inelastic.
Yeah. So oil, you mean also like
petrol?
Petrol, yeah, exactly. So people need to go to work. They need to use their car. So if the price of oil increases, the demand doesn't decrease that much, right? It still does. I mean, people can take the public transport, they can use the the bike, or they can walk. But yeah. Any other example for low elasticity or for high elasticity, maybe? Yes? Mike? Why is everybody's name Mike?
Hello? Okay, perfect. So for lowest elasticity, I probably pin that towards something I think we already mentioned before, but in the realm of luxury goods, something like Supreme, the brand Supreme, more or less, something like luxury clothing, like what is it, Hermes clothing, more or less, for example. If let's say the price of those goods goes up, the actual quantity demand of the actual supply in question wouldn't be affected, more or less, because the actual buyers of that product in question already have enough income to actually afford the price increase, more or less.
I think you're already thinking about the Veblen goods in a way, and luxury goods are often, or Veblen goods are mostly luxury goods, but like in general, luxury goods would actually be a high elasticity. So if the price of diamonds increase, then people don't really need diamonds, and if there's like other more important stuff to buy, they might focus on that. But then of course it like mingles with this whole like concept of Veblen goods. But yeah, I mean, high elasticity is often luxury goods, or for example iced tea or something, right? Like if iced tea increases by price, people often there's other alternatives like cola or something, so they really quickly jump. Also with substitution goods, there's this example, I don't know how true it is, but between butter and margarine. So if butter increases substantially in price, then people just use margarine. Yeah. So if we keep this definition in mind, do you have any idea which one is the one that is inelastic and which one is the one that is elastic? Mike? Elastic left?
Yeah. Elastic left.
Okay. Other opinions?
Okay.
So the left one is inelastic and the right one is elastic, right? Because we can see that here the inelastic one, the price rather changes a lot, right? From price 1 to price 2. So it's going up quite a lot. But actually the quantity demanded is not decreasing that much. And on the right side, we see the opposite. The price changes a little bit, or the price changes and the quantity overly responded. And like if we calculated that in economic terms, we would basically, the measure for elasticity is how much does the quantity demanded change if the price changed by 1%. Right? Then there's these perfectly inelastic and perfectly elastic things. Does somebody have an idea about a perfectly inelastic good? You wanted to say something? Milk? No. If milk, you can't live without milk? No? Okay, then maybe it's your preference.
Would it be any?
For kids? Yeah, okay, yeah. So famous examples would be medicine, right? Like insulin or something, like you really need that and you probably make a lot happen to buy it at any price. Okay, so as a conclusion, the dynamics between supply and demand are market forces that can be used to estimate the equilibrium quantity and price. And we saw some mechanisms of why we would assume that we always end up in the equilibrium. And all other things being equal, the demand decreases with the price, with increasing price, and the supply increases with increasing price. And there are also different factors that influence these kind of curves, which are, for example, elasticity, and some of them shift the equilibrium around, and some of them, like on the graph or on the curve, and others move the entire curves. Like if, for example, the consumer base earns a lot more money, then this whole demand curve is shifting. Okay, let's go to the next chapter, which is market forms. And typically economists distinguish between 3 market forms. It's perfect competition, which is many firms and many consumers. And then we have the oligopoly with a few firms and many consumers. And the monopoly, where it's one firm and many consumers. A special type of oligopoly is the duopoly, where you have 2 firms. For example, I don't know, in the Mac OS and Windows, maybe Linux, that's a bad example, but maybe for smartphones you have iOS and Android. And the more competition a firm faces, the less market power it has. And some of the discussions that we had went a little bit into this direction, right? Like, why should, is it actually possible that other companies are joining the market or not? And market power is basically the ability to affect the price through choosing a certain production level. And if you think about it, like in a perfectly competitive market, when you decide to mingle a little bit with the equilibrium, just some other firm would jump in and basically steal whatever you try to steal from the people. But if you're the only firm, you have a lot of room to navigate this. So a few examples for the monopoly. There are postal services in many European countries, or railway services in many European countries. So there's mostly only one service provider. Oligopoly, maybe cloud providers. There's a few, but those few are dominating the market in a way. Mobile phone service, where there's probably 3 to 5 different cellular services available per country. And as I said before, smartphone OS. And in perfect competition, that is something a lot of consumer products with low barrier of entry, for example, a kebab stand in Berlin or an espresso bar in Italy. I think especially the espresso bar in Italy is quite interesting because the espresso, it costs everywhere the same. I think it's €1 or 1.20. And I think the first stand that would go to 1.30 would have no customers, right? Because they could just buy literally a few meters away and get basically the same coffee. And here we can see that the barrier of entry is very low, right? You don't need much to offer that. You just need a small stand and a coffee machine, and you're basically there. So why are we discussing this? Of course, the current Web2 landscape consists of several firms with a lot of market power in their respective market segment. And we want to understand a bit better from the economic perspective why too much market power is not a good thing. So let's talk about perfect competition. I already hinted a little bit on that. There are so many firms that a single firm's production quantity does not affect market price. And what is interesting is the marginal costs. So whatever costs me to produce one additional unit of production equals the market price. So, and that kind of makes sense if you think that firms have zero profit, right? And profit is actually after all the costs. So whenever there would be profit to be made, since there's a low barrier of entry, there would be just another company jumping in and extracting this profit. Right? So we have a low barrier of entry, which means firms can exit and enter however they want. So they basically scoop up all the profits that they are. And this drives the price also down to these marginal costs, where the unit produced, or the price of the unit is basically the marginal costs. And in the example of the espresso, you can be pretty sure that it's very hard to offer the coffee for 1.10, for example, if it's 1.20, because there's so many firms competing for that there must be some reason why it's 1.20. So this is showing the equilibrium price, right? If you would offer the espresso for more, nobody would buy for you, and if you offer it for less, you would actually make a loss on your production. So let's look at monopolies. As we remember, it's one firm, basically. There's monopoly, and then there's monopolistic markets. So monopoly means it's literally only one company, and monopolistic market is there's actually a lot of companies or a few companies, but basically there's only one, right? The market share of that one is very, very high. So how do these monopolies form? And generally, it's a lack of competition. And they basically serve the entire market. There's a lack of substitutes, and there's no similar products that provide the same utility. And often these markets are characterized by high barriers of entry. So you need to make big investments to actually even start, like chip production, for example. Or there are legal restrictions. Often we have what is called licensed monopoly, where basically it's illegal to offer your own service, and the license is only given to one company. So, there's no chance that another company could actually enter. Then we have the technological monopoly, which is basically also going with the high barrier of entry, like chip productions, where you need to make so high investments to actually compete that it's almost impossible to do. And so therefore these monopolists are sole price setters, and they serve only to maximize their own profits, and that is obviously bad for the consumer, because the monopolist is able to steal some of the rent of the consumers. As a question, is the government a monopoly? Mics? But why? Okay, why and how and where? Elaborate a little bit.
Probably, like you said in the last slide, there were like legal barriers, and governments have some legal rights that others don't have. For example, maybe selling weapons or something like that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true. So they have the legitimate use of force in a way, right? Like they have a standing army and maybe the police. Other areas where the government could be regarded as a monopoly?
You are not allowed to change government. It's not easy for you to move to other government if you want to, like, travel to another place or be part of another government, and you are obligated to pay taxes for this. So you pay for the service even if you don't like the service.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know where you come from, but it's rather okay to travel to some other places and actually emigrate. But what you're saying is that like they have a monopoly on regulation, right? Like they are the only ones that making laws, basically.
I think government is not directly a monopoly. Like government, first of all, like can create monopolies by setting up the rules for other organizations if the government is not doing business, and even if the government has rules that the government is doing a particular business, like either airline, railways, or something, then also it can't be called a monopoly because it's actually a government. If ideally, if there's no corrupt government, ideally it is the people who are living in the nation, and then they are paying the taxes and they are running it. So I'm not sure if we can call that a monopoly or it as a public service where people are directly funding through taxes.
So I think it's definitely an open question, right? Like it's not like there's an answer to this. Yeah, this is a good point. This is like going like a very like
the ideal
positive view about democracy, right? Like the people actually have the power, and therefore it's not a monopoly.
Yeah, like you can
but
change,
at the end, it's still a monopoly, right? Like it doesn't matter where the decisions come from. Like if everybody could vote how the railway service works, it's still a monopoly, right?
Yeah, but
it's only about like who actually offers the
that
service.
depends on the government, and then there's a lot of variations of the democracy's definition across the world. But
Yeah, sure.
I would like to believe so that it is.
I mean, that's a point. That's a point of view. And then also provider of public goods. I mean, building streets and stuff. I think it's not that clear. I think in Germany, at least, I know a few like privately built highways, but in general, public goods are funded by government. Yes, one more.
Yeah, couldn't the argument be made that the different parties, let's say in an election, are the ones that are providing the different services? Like,
Sorry, I didn't.
Couldn't it be the argument be made that the different parties in an election be the different providers of a service in akin to like different companies?
I mean, not really, no. Like they don't provide the service. They just compete of who is actually running the monopoly in a way.
But wouldn't like the government just be the, I don't know, like a tool to actually provide it, and the decisions are just being taken by different ways of ruling? I mean, the different.
Yeah, but I mean, still at the end, there's one ruler, right? One provider of services. Okay, I just wanted to tease you a bit. I don't like. There's no official answer to this, I guess. But I would say so. I would say that the government actually has a monopoly on different services, and now we come to the disadvantages. And maybe I'm sure like everybody kind of knows their own stories with why the government isn't efficient in some ways, and they might actually map nicely to this. So in general, there's higher prices because they are free to set the prices however they want, right? They are often offering inferior products because there's no competition to actually, have better products than somebody else. So they don't it's just investment and just cost into producing a better product, which, you can just don't do. And then there's the so-called price discrimination, where especially in monopolistic markets, you can offer different prices, charge for different customers, and then you can basically extract the rent of each of these customer base. And there are 3 conditions for this price discrimination to work. The first one is that the company needs to have sufficient market power, right? So we see that obviously in monopolies, but for example, I think also cellular services often like offer student rebates and different, prices to different customers, and this also shows that they have quite a market power. And then, of course, the company actually needs to be able to identify the differences in demand of these consumer bases. And what is very important is that the company needs to be able to restrict secondary markets, right? Because otherwise, you could just buy the good and resell it to the consumer base that needs to pay a higher price, and therefore, you would basically reduce the price back to the competitive price, and only companies with high market power can actually force you to not do that, right? They would restrict it with like legal documentation based on your name or something else. And then generally, this leads to suboptimal pricing and suboptimal social welfare, because consumers either pay more than they should, which is a monopolist tax, or they are actually excluded from the market, right? Through price discrimination. Maybe some people would actually like to consume the good and the price would actually allow it, but for them the price is too high. There's one example of the antitrust case against Microsoft in 1990s, where Microsoft actually kind of abused their market power and engaged in anti-competitive practices where they intertwined Windows OS with the Internet Explorer. So you had to have Internet Explorer in your Windows, and if you removed it, it would cause a blue screen of death. And they wanted to basically kill the competition with other browsers, and there's no reason why Internet Explorer would cause a blue screen of death if you removed it. Do you think monopolies have advantages? No. Some question, somebody wants to discuss? Over there? Yes.
So it depends on who created the game and how what interests the game has been rigged for. So I think it's completely advantageous so for example, if you create a rule where you create an incentive for dairy farmers to produce more milk on their farms, maybe the quality of the animal care will be less because your output needs to be more. And then that impacts organic farmers who are not, it depends on how you create the rules of the game. And that's what, going back to the government question that you have, I think the way that a constitution is created and the rules of that constitution, have you separated power and state, church and state? Have you created the game to include the interests of all parties involved or not?
Okay, but can you name specific advantages that you could think of for a monopoly?
It depends. Is the monopoly creating advantages for specific user groups that are inside of that game?
For specification, you said?
Yeah, specific user groups inside of that game. So the example I just gave with the farmers and the government, it could be advantageous for those farmers that decide to play those rules.
So what you're saying maybe is, when I get it right, specialization in general, like economies of scale. Like if the monopoly can actually focus on one specific problem, it can direct the resources much better to it, and it doesn't need to think about all the other companies trying to undercut them, and they can focus more on that could be better. And since they are the only ones basically offering the service, they have economies of scale. They can really benefit from that. Yes?
Yeah, the continuous improvement of one public good, just focusing in one thing, you can do it better.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's what I said, right? Like economies of scale, specialization. Some other example? Yes?
Monopoly in bad things, the example that I had in mind, something like drugs, drug dealers or something, so they have monopoly and they can increase the price, and then like it's good that we will not buy from them or something.
But I don't think that they are very interested in that people not buying from them, right? Like they are still interested in selling their drugs. Yeah.
Hello, Johan here. The monopoly of weapons sellings, the monopoly of weapons and military power that has the governments,
Yeah.
It's actually quite better because in countries that people are not allowed to get more weapons, it's more safe for everyone.
That's a good point, right? Like, yeah, you can control better in the sense of weapons. You maybe want to control who can have the weapons and who cannot, and it's much easier if you have a single point of. That's a good point. Yes, there are so many. One over there, and then we can move on. Sorry if I overgo a few of you.
I think the advantage is one is the swiftness of reaching agreement and make the action.
Yeah.
For example, like Web3 servers or protocols is slow in reaching consensus compared to Web2 service.
Yeah,
and,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yes, less organizational overhead. Okay, so oligopolies are basically somewhat between monopolies and perfect competition, and prices are generally lower and overall market participation is higher, but still they share some of the disadvantages from monopolies with regard from the consumer perspective, but they also have some advantages from perfect competition. Okay, so what did we learn? Markets differ in how much market power the firm possesses. And economics typically distinguishes between three forms, ordered by increasing market power. So perfect competition, many firms in the market. Basically, one company doesn't have any power, like nobody cares if they are there or not, if they drop in or drop out. They cannot increase the price because nobody would buy from them. They cannot decrease the price because the price is already like at the margin, right? So if you would decrease the price, you would basically run at a loss. Oligopoly is a few markets, a few firms in the market. A special type is the duopoly, where you have two firms. Then the monopoly, where you have one firm in the market. And a monopolistic market is basically a market where there appear to be many firms or several firms, but basically the market power lies within the hand of one. And the monopoly is generally viewed to cause inefficiencies, especially, of course, for consumers and in general for welfare. And there's a lot of research about that. And there's a lot of ways to show that empirically and also like in some nice graphs. But I wanted to skip that here for the general message. Okay, let's continue with the economics of specialization. Or why bothering trading at all. And there's a very famous quote from Adam Smith. It is the maxim of every prudent master of a family never to attempt to make at home what it will cost him more to make than to buy. So which, you know, it means that you should just, like, if you can't do anything better than somebody else, you should just like buy it from them in a way, specialize in what you can do. And there's like, in a way, an empirical puzzle, at least if you look from the outside of it. Many countries trade, even though one has an absolute advantage in producing many of the traded goods, right? For example, the US is so well equipped to cheaply produce both complex computer chips and agricultural goods, such as potatoes, but they still specialize in producing the former and actually importing from other countries the latter, right? And the question is why? I mean, they are just so good in doing everything. Why do they actually bother to trade? And the answer here is comparative advantage. And I think it's a very important concept that I want to show you. And consider the following example. So suppose Alice can produce 10 kilograms of meat and 20 kilograms of potatoes per hour. Suppose Bob can produce 2 kilograms of meat and 10 kilograms of potatoes per hour. So what you can see here is that Alice actually has an absolute advantage over Bob in producing both goods, right? She's better in producing meat and she's better in producing potatoes. But Alice has only a comparative advantage over Bob at producing meat. And the reason is that she has lower opportunity costs of producing meat in terms of foregone potatoes, right? Because in an hour she can either produce this meat or potatoes, and she has only a finite time available to her. So the opportunity costs of Alice for 1 kilogram of meat is actually 2 kilograms of potatoes, right? So for 1 kilogram of meat, she doesn't produce 2 kilograms of potatoes.
Is it or and? Like when you say 10 kilograms of meat and 20 kilograms of potatoes, she
Or,
does both
yeah.
because it's and.
Where? I don't get it.
So Alice can make either 10 kilograms or.
Or, yeah. No, wait.
It's written and.
Suppose can produce 10 kilogram of meat and. I mean, she can, so within 1 hour, she has 1 hour. She can eat, yeah, or. She can either produce 10 kilogram of meat or. Yeah, sorry. Sorry for the confusion, yes.
Makes sense.
And the opportunity cost for Bob is 1 kilogram of meat, and he forgoes 5 kilogram of potatoes. But if you look at the other way around, like if you look at the opportunity costs of producing potatoes, then Alice can only produce half a kilogram of meat, and Bob produces a 1/5 kilogram of meat. So yeah, we will see that in a minute. So by the same observation, so they cannot have both the comparative advantage in both, right? So Alice has both the absolute advantage in both dimensions, but only the comparative advantage in producing meat, and therefore Bob has the comparative advantage in producing potatoes. And we will see that in a minute. So I can show you in a minute that if they focus both on their comparative advantage, the total welfare is higher, and even the individual welfare in a situation of autarky. And autarky means that if everybody just produces and consumes for themselves. Right? So autarky means there's no trade, there's no interaction between the two. And the question is why, and the reason is specialization. And let's assume that both require meat and potatoes. And in the situation A, so in autarky, both divide their time equally between producing meat and producing potatoes. And let's say we have only 8 hours per day, so both of them are producing potatoes and meat for 4 hours each day. And in the situation B, they can actually, after they produce, they can trade with each other. And here, for example, Alice focuses most of her time to produce meat because she has a comparative advantage there, and some potatoes, while Bob focuses only on producing potatoes. We can actually use this example from before to make some small calculations. And we can show that with trade, they are both better off. So this is the situation. Situation A, autarky. So left is the production table. As I said, this is the production for 1 hour. So Alice can produce 10 kilogram of meat per hour or 20 kilogram of potatoes per hour, and Bob 2 kilogram of meat and 10 kilogram of potatoes. And let's say they spend half of their day producing each of them, right? Because they want to have both. And in autarky, this means that Alice can produce 40 kilograms of meat and 80 kilograms of potatoes. And Bob spends 4 time producing meat, 8 kilograms of meat, and 40 kilograms of potato. So this is basically the autarky, right? And then the game stops, and they both have this kind of allocation. And now we have another situation where they focus on the comparative advantage. Let's say that Alice produces 5 hours on meat and 3 hours on potatoes, so she has 50 kilograms of meat and 60 kilograms of potato. And Bob only focuses on producing potatoes. He puts all his hours into potatoes and ends up with 18 kilograms of potatoes and 0 kilogram of meat. And now the problem is you don't know how much they like potatoes and meat individually. So you don't know whether this situation is actually different from before, right? But we can show that with trade, they can have both more from everything. And that is, without actually knowing how much they like it, we know they have more. So it's a better situation. So left is autarky, and right is the trade situation, or actually the comparative advantage situation. So we can see that, for example, Alice has 50 kilograms of meat, so she could just trade 9 meat away. Then she would have 41 kilogram of meat, which is more than 40. And the 9 meat would go to Bob. And Bob actually trades back 30 kilograms of potatoes, so Alice ends up with 90 kilograms of potatoes, which is more than 80. And so we can see that at the end, everybody has more from everything, right? And that is what I want to show you, that with trading, if they focus on their comparative advantage, they can have more. And it's not actually important to know how much they like everything specifically, because they have more in every dimension, right? So there's like no discussion of whether one potato is actually worth more than one meat, because they have more of everything. And in that sense, the price of meat would be 3 potatoes, but that's just one example, right? Like, to make it better afterward, like, or to understand it better, we would need to understand how much more they like meat than potatoes, but this is way too complicated. So Alice can produce both meat and potatoes more efficiently than Bob, and this is an absolute advantage. But because she can specialize, so specialize isn't about the absolute production efficiency, and what matters is for trade is where they can have the lower opportunity costs, right? So Alice actually had the lower opportunity costs in producing meat and Bob in potatoes. And this is exactly what is about the comparative advantage. And what does that tell us for our daily life? And I guess this basically means stick with what you're good at in a way. So suppose you want to feel good and basically help cleaning the oceans, but you're a very good programmer or very good founder. Quitting your job and actually helping clean up the beaches might not be the best way to do it, right? Because it's not your comparative advantage. Your comparative advantage is probably being a founder or being in IT, right? So it might be much better to actually donate some of your income to some people that are actually better in cleaning up the ocean. I think another very important aspect here is to know that only if somebody has an absolute advantage in everything, let's say you have a coworker that is just better in everything, right? We have them all around us. It doesn't mean that you cannot contribute, right? Because that person cannot do everything because they have only limited amount of time. And I think that is very interesting also from the perspective of a work environment, right? Where people have maybe an absolute advantage in everything, they cannot have a comparative advantage in everything, right? So everybody can still contribute. One question to you, what is the opportunity costs of being here for you? So there's no like perfect answer, like just go ahead. Yes?
So I think for every participant of PBA...
no, for you personally.
Well, for me personally, I could have worked and earned money, but I decided to study and take a break.
So you forgo on a lot of income for this?
It depends, varies from person to person, yes. It depends on the salary.
Some other person?
Money?
Money, yes, money, of course.
Creating meme coins?
You could create meme coins in the meantime, yes, and get be a millionaire. Yes?
My friends went for 2 weeks to Alps, so I'm
So you're
missing
missing
that.
Yeah. Okay, one more maybe. Maybe somebody which we didn't have? No.
Okay. I didn't actually have anything, so my opportunity cost was just infinite, I guess.
You didn't touch?
I didn't have anything else, so...
So your opportunity cost would be?
Infinite?
Infinite? No, like zero. Like you think it's zero, let's say it like this. What are you giving, like opportunity cost is what are you giving up to be here? And this couldn't be monetary terms. I mean, of course, an economist would say that actually 2 weeks in the Alps is not a correct answer. Like how much money is that worth to you, right? Like how much money do you pay to be there? And you, like from an economic perspective, I would make the assumption that the opportunity cost of being here for you is for everyone higher than what they could do, right? Like otherwise you're doing some mistake. If you're here and you could actually be doing something more valuable to you, you should actually do the other thing. So yeah, let's hope and let's assume this is the perfect place for you to be and you actually made all the calculations and you want to be here, which I think makes sense. Don't worry. Okay,
I
so
beg to differ that because once you are selling him that the monetary cost, so they don't correlate both the points.
They don't correlate?
With due respect, the second point that you mentioned, that if you were doing something more important, which would always be non-monetary.
No, I didn't say that. I said everything can be translated to money, right?
Yeah.
Like from an economic perspective, what you should do is like, you basically think how much, I mean, I don't say this is how humans work, but from the economics perspective, you will translate everything into money. What could you do? Everything, and being at PBA should give you the highest payout. So you're here.
Not really. It should be the sacrifices that you make in return. So PBA, like I'm missing my second-year-old daughter's second birthday. Nothing at PBA will give me that, right? So what I'm making.
But yeah,
that's what I said. Money and Alps and stuff like that don't correlate. Only if it could be translated to money, then you are right.
Yeah. So that is what I was saying quite often, that the traditional economic theory would say that you can translate everything to money. And then the other point of the course is that maybe it's not the case, yeah. And you're making the case that you cannot. Let's move on, and that's actually something that I like jokingly said, like your opportunity cost of being here is of course not zero, because you're always giving up something. And that is the next chapter, basically time as the ultimate resource. This is a little bit philosophical, but I think it's still important to think about that. That time is the only one resource that is uniformly distributed and yet cannot accumulate it or saved for later, right? Like everything else you kind of can accumulate, save, and like spend whenever you need it, but time you cannot, right? And in your case, of course, you're always giving something up. You're giving up time that you could just do something else. And it's always moving, never at rest. And it's a unique property of time that actually has these incredible implications also for money and finance, right? Like everything in economics is basically driven by opportunity costs, and this is driven by time, right? Because you cannot accumulate or save time. And the fundamental principle, I think especially important for the founders, which they for sure know already, is that money now is worth more than the same amount in the future. And why? Because of opportunity costs, right? You can, the money that you have now has the potential to be invested, to be used differently, and ideally yielding a higher payout in the future. And there's this concept in economics that is called the present value and the value of now. And that is the question of how much money in the future is actually worth. So a certain amount of money in the future, how much is it worth now? Right? And this principle says, that I mentioned before, is that it's always worth more now than in the future. And it's basically, the question is how, what value would make you indifferent between getting some money now versus later? And we won't go into too much details here, but you can use like risk-free interest rates and stuff to basically calculate how much the future money would be worth to you now. And yeah, it should be like kind of a guiding principle. It underlines the importance of wise decisions today for a brighter tomorrow. And it shows that nothing is for free, right? This is a very important thing. Like nothing is for free. You always give up something. And if people want to tell you something is for free, it's never for free. At least you give up time. At least you give up attention. And yeah, it's a fundamental cornerstone to guiding personal saving, investments, and wide range financial decisions. Okay, so do we need a break or can we still go on? Do you need a break? No? Okay, let's go on to the last chapter, to behavioral biases. As I mentioned, my background is in behavioral economics, so I like that topic quite a lot. And behavioral biases are systematic errors in decision making when people use mental shortcuts, often heuristics, to process information and make judgments, often to save time. And for a long time, and I mentioned this a few times, economic theory was built on the assumption that all actors are rational, right? Like everything can be translated to money, and everybody's just interested in their self and maximizing their own payout. So there's no regard for fairness, altruism, or equality, right? And in traditional economic theory, like there's no room for any of these preferences. They should not affect your decision making. And all available information is considered, like you're basically a computer that can calculate the craziest probabilities and actually then maximize everything on top of that. And of course, that is not the reality, right? Like in human decision making is prone to these behavioral biases. And very importantly, there's no influence of emotions, right? Which is certainly not true. And this works. I mean, traditional economic theory still works very nicely. I don't want to put this into too negative field. So it works very well in many circumstances, especially on an aggregated level, right? Like stock markets are behaving generally very efficient and rational. And also like firms that have like a very proper decision-making process with a lot of people and with a lot of people that focus on important factors. But in many cases, it just doesn't. And most humans are prone to behavioral biases and are influenced by social preferences. So behavioral economics is mainly concerned with the bounds of rationality of economic agents. And those psychological factors that I mentioned are actually allowed to be influenced. And there are like theories built around the fact that these things exist, and then actually try to derive new predictions that work better with the actually observed behavior of humans. And for example, psychologist Daniel Kahneman received the Nobel Prize in 2022 for prospect theory, which is a fundamental theory in behavioral economics. And they basically found out that individuals assess losses differently than gains. So if we think about utility or value to you, it costs you more to lose $100 than to gain $100. And I guess everybody kind of relate to this, right? If you suddenly lose $100, you're kind of like, it hurts you a lot more than if you suddenly gain $100. And this is, not really interpretable in outside behavioral economics. So what is very important is that behavior is not random, right? I'm not saying that people do whatever and you cannot predict it and who knows, and they are just deviating. And I think that is very important. Like behavioral economics doesn't assume that we cannot do anything about it, and like we don't even try to analyze behavior. But the behavior is systematic, but it's just not in line with traditional theory. There are some key behavioral biases. For example, the confirmation bias. Decision makers focus on information that cater to their prior beliefs and opinion and neglect new information. And I think this is especially pronounced today, where we are kind of often in these echo chambers, maybe generated by some algorithms that feed you the information that you already know. So you are not very likely to engage with different opinions. Then there's the sunk cost fallacy. I think that is very prevalent, probably especially in among us. That instead of cutting losses, decision makers continue to pour resources into failed endeavor because you already invested something, so like just keep investing. But the economic truth is like the money that you invested is already gone. You should like make the decision based on the information that you have now. Then the herding effect. People follow the crowd without making their own informed decisions. It's like a little bit FOMO, what you said before. Then the gambler's fallacy, which is also a very interesting one. In many situations, probability of repeated events are independent from each other, but the decision maker don't see that, right? Like if you flip a coin and it's 3 times head, then often people say, well, the next time is probably also head. But I mean, the probability is unrelated with each other. That's especially in gambling, right? Like if it's 3 times black, maybe somebody says, now it must be red or something, right? But it's just the same probability than before because they are not related. Then we have a very powerful one that is the default effect. And that is people tend to stick with pre-selected choices. And there's actually, I will say that later. So whenever something is already decided for you, it takes some cognitive effort to argue against that and actually deviate from this. And a lot of companies are actually exploiting this with like pre-selecting accept all cookies or something, or making it very hard to like open this cookie thing and then go through the whole list. So you just accept whatever they are offering you. And then overconfidence is also a very big one, where people overestimate their abilities. So if you ask people who thinks is an above average driver driving a car, like more than 50% say they are, which statistically doesn't work. And actually, this is a good example where some biases actually lead to some efficiencies in a way, because there's a lot of studies where people that are actually highly overconfident, they also achieve higher performance. So there's some, like, they cannot really, they should know that they are not as good as they think, but they are actually better than they are in a way when they are suffering from this bias. So that, this could mean why this is still prevalent. Somebody else know any additional biases or could think of? Yeah. Mike?
Maybe fear.
Fear?
Yeah, fear, like fearing and not taking actions, like this affects behavior. So not trading because of fear.
Yeah, I think that is goes a little bit into the bias omission. Like you should do something, but you don't. I'm not sure. Why is that a bias? Like you should trade. Like the rational choice would be to trade. Or?
Yes. Yeah, if the rational choice is to do something, but then because of fear, you don't do it.
Yeah, I never thought about, like, I never heard of fear being like an rational. Like, I guess you could say that if it's really rational to do it and you don't because of fear, like the question is what drives the fear? Maybe there's some underlying motive there, but
I think that maybe something like the imposter syndrome. The opposite to the overconfidence, that you don't provide enough value to your product or what you are, and maybe you could act opposite what should be.
So it's basically an underconfidence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rachel, I want to add something on fear. So one thing is the driving force of fear is the cost of the mistake. For example, you know that this something's right, but then if I do a mistake while executing this thing, I cannot reverse back, you know? And then if something, it is easily reversible, it's okay, I can just do it because I know I can just go it back, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's called like regret aversion. It's basically you want to avoid regretting something and you regret overly, right? Like if you lose $100, the regret for losing the $100 is much higher than the $100. So then it becomes like not really rational anymore, and then we're in the right domain. Yeah. Yes. I try to. Yes, I think you.
I think one that we see very commonly in the blockchain Web3 space is authority bias, which is the tendency to give greater importance to the opinions and statements of those in authority, irrespective of their knowledge, skill, or true authority, right? People talking about L2s, L3s, blockchain, and they really don't know anything about the fundamentals. Something like SBF, right, being a key figure and being authoritative. So I think authority bias is a big one.
Yeah, I think there were actually there were crazy experiments about that. I think in the 60s, like with this Milgram experiments, where I don't know if you know it, like people were actually told that there was like some test subjects were supposed to do some tests, and a random person was supposed to observe the tests, and whenever they did a mistake, they were told to shock them, like electronic shocks. And it was an actor, so he just played to be shocked. But for the people, they didn't know that. And just because there was an authority telling them to shock people, like most of the people would actually shock them almost until death, right? Like sometimes the test subject came in and said like something like, oh, I don't know if it's good to be shocked because I have like a heart stent, or I don't know how it's called, like this electronic device here. So maybe don't shock me, but they still did, right? Like because some authoritative figure told them, hey, you should do it.
What's the name of the experiment again?
I think Milgram experiments. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, they are kind of crazy because they also like led to a lot of like psychological damage to the people that were actually shocking, right? Because they didn't like, they never thought of themselves shocking people to death, and then suddenly they do theoretically, right? It's especially after like all the Second World War where people were actually thinking like, how could that ever happen? And yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Here, this side.
Yeah.
So I think Marcus also wants to say something. Marcus, do you want to say?
Yeah.
Mike. This section's mic. You need your section's mic. Or you can have this.
So you just wanted to say that he wants to say?
No, he was having his hand up before me, so I just wanted to give him.
Yeah, sorry, I just go a little bit randomly and try to like uniformly distribute it. I'm sorry.
Reinforcement bias, and then gender bias, and then all those things, inequality bias, those also go into the economics, like behavioral economics, right? Like you would always assume girls to be more careful with their money and guys to be more spending, which is not so always the truth, right?
Yeah.
I do spend a lot of money, and my wife think it's wrong. So that's reinforcement bias is like the version of confirmation bias, but reinforcing something again and again, and then actually it is wrong.
Yeah, that's kind of herding, or like yeah.
No, herding would be too many people going together. Reinforcement is only targeted to a single person for the event. That this is reinforced, the negative belief is always reinforced.
I mean, yeah, there's these things like information cascades, I think, but they are leading to herding, yeah. I would say that. Okay. Yeah, I think we should move on soon. Like, I think you wanted to say something, right? You were like, okay.
All right. So this is relating with the sunk cost fallacy. Just like an example, real quick. This is fairly common within the Web3 crypto space as well. It's the term hodling, more or less. It's when more or less you hold on to any sort of actual like cryptocurrency coin or any sort of like NFT or more or less anything of value within the actual Web3 space, regardless of the actual market price value. Because, well, you know, if let's say you bought it early and more or less you invested a high amount, obviously a high amount of money into it, then more or less you want to actually like, you know, don't want to risk like, you know, losing any sort of like potential value, more or less.
Yeah, sure. What's like, yeah? Or what is the question? Is that a question?
Well, I was just providing an example, just to,
yeah,
just for others to like have like an
right.
example.
Yeah, so a few more biases is, for example, the endowment effect, which describes the fact that once you own something, you put a different value to it than if you don't own it. One of our previous colleagues, Sam, he was also a Web3 Foundation researcher. He went to the World Championship of Football. And he was actually offered before he went to the stadium, I think like $10,000 for his ticket or something. And he was not willing to give that up, right? But he would not be willing to pay $10,000 to buy the ticket, which doesn't make sense, right? Like either you don't give it up because it's too low, but then you should, you know, it doesn't make sense. Then the availability bias, where people make you know, decisions based on the information that they are readily available. So whenever you think about something that happened to you, you put a higher probability to that to happening to everybody else because you have it available in your mind. Yeah, the anchoring effect is also interesting. For example, in crypto, there's like these price anchors of 1 or 10 or 100, which just sounds nice to people, and like there's no economic reason why it should converge to it, but it does. Yeah, I think he's pretty rational. Like he's constantly performing well, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
But maybe it's rational also, because it could be kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because the announcement basically means that other people might also trade for it, and that actually makes it quite rational to buy in. The question is, what is your underlying motivation to go in there? You need your mic. Yeah, a few minutes, yeah, maybe 10 or 20.
That would be appeal to authority, right?
I mean, yeah, could be. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, he's not in the room with you forcing to do it. I think, maybe you could frame it like this, but
You don't need to be in the room to like focus on it. Like appeal to authority is like, okay, I do this because
yeah,
some
but you're
higher
referring
knowledge
more
force does
more
it.
in a way to like expert, right? Like he's more the draw to expertism, but maybe not authority. I mean, he's not telling you to do it, right? I think there's a small nuance difference. I think it doesn't matter that much, but I don't think in that situation he's the authority.
Yeah, but
Because
it's not
there
like-
needs to be some element of force.
There does not need an element of force to you be able to just say like appeal to authority.
Oh, let's disagree. Yes, somebody wanted to say that. Say you. Give a mic.
I was wondering if it could be the gambler's fallacy. Like, maybe like this has been something that has happened before, and like the price of this stock has gone up, so I sort of based it on that.
I'm not sure it doesn't fit that well because it's like these in the gambler's fallacy you have like some repeated events with probably like you see a pattern. I mean, you could always construct it in a way, right? You already saw the pattern before, and then you believe that it's more likely to happen again. But I would say it's more hurting, right? Like either you do it because everybody else does it, or it might be rational because you believe that everybody else will do it, then you do it kind of rationality.
Can it be overconfidence?
Overconfidence?
Overconfidence not on me, but overconfidence on Warren Buffett because he's doing it, so that must be correct.
No, I think overconfidence is more like an intrinsic property of yourself. Like if you believe that I can outcompete the market by 10%, that is probably overconfidence. But
Because what trust Warren Buffett more on the investment side, so he's just really right.
Mike.
So, like the world trusts Warren Buffett on his investment decisions, right? So, probably because of that, people don't follow like herd mentality. Maybe not everybody decisions, but since Warren Buffett has a very great portfolio and investment strategy, so anybody who admire him so may go and invest, follow his footprints on that.
Okay, yeah, it sounds a little bit
Just
like
like
hurting.
influential, I would say, more like you impress with someone who is very expert or very, very veteran in this particular industry. So
Yeah.
you go with his decisions and they don't think much and don't research more on the investment strategy.
That sounds like hurting, right? Okay, situation 2. A stock investor bought a big position in Disney at around $100. I don't even know where it's today. Then the scandal unfolds and the price plummets. Investor keeps buying in at 80, 50, and finally 5, 3, and 1. You can easily translate to some other markets. When a friend asks him to stop, he keeps arguing to recover the losses by buying the dip and to further reducing the average buying price. Yeah. Somebody? Default effect? No. Gamblers? No. What is it? We had it before. Sunk costs? Yeah, that's right. So what can you do about it? I think you have to learn to accept losses. Sounds more easy than it is. Okay, next one. Peter wants to buy a new smartphone and fancies the new iPhone. Mentally, he's already looking forward to finally buy it, but a friend urges him to do some more research. He agrees and is reading through articles that pop up after Googling why you should buy the new iPhone. Confirmation bias, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the prevention is obvious, right? You should also look why you shouldn't buy the iPhone, maybe, or some more objective thing on there. Then actually a nice example of another one is a Swiss energy company could, and that is actually real numbers, could increase the number of renewable electricity contracts from 3% to 80 to 90% by pre-selecting the green option when customers were renewing their energy contracts. What is that? Default. And it's actually astonishing how big the effect is, right? Like just putting the pre-selected option, which is for the company, it's like zero costs, would actually increase that so much. There's also some research about especially this green energy stuff that it might also be bad because people now have green energy, so they feel more easy to waste it. But yeah. So another one, which is actually a real story, Andrew. Not about Microsoft stocks, but still. Andrew had 50 Microsoft stocks. He decided to sell 40 of them at a price of $350, still keeping 10. He used his earnings to pay some bills and does not plan to buy any stocks back. In the following days, he caught himself looking at the charts, hoping the price would go down to less than $350. Who found themselves in this situation? Like ever? No? Always. Is this rational? Yes? Why? How so? You have to answer. How so? You said yes, right?
I think it's overconfidence.
Overconfidence?
Overconfidence bias.
No. Yeah, in a way. Maybe it's kind of a regret aversion, right? Obviously what happens, right? Like he has only 10 stocks left, so he wants to have the price. If the price goes up, he has more money. If the price goes down, he has less money. There's nothing, no. And also since I said that he's not planning to buy back, there's no reason why he should hope for the lower price. Maybe regret aversion, maybe it hurts him mentally to have sold at the higher price, at the lower price. But yeah, maybe a little bit some cost fallacy. Okay, let's go on. The Titan submersible incident, I'm sure you heard about this. I wanted to make a small point about that. It was a terrible accident. On June 18th in 2023, Titan, a submersible operated by American tourism company OceanGate, imploded during an expedition to the Titanic wreck. That's how it looked like. On board were Stockton Rush, the CEO, and I think 4 others that lost their life, which is quite terrible. Communication was lost 1 hour and 45 minutes into the dive, and the vessel failed to resurface later that day. And 4 days later, the debris were found, and they were discovered near the Titanic. So many industry experts had expressed safety concerns about Titan, but the OceanGate CEO had not thought certification of the Titan, right? So you can undergo certification where basically some experts, look at your schematics and say that it's safe and it's actually appropriate for that depth and so on. And they actually published, and that was before the accident, the following blog post to give a reasoning why they are not looking for certification. And they said, classing assures ship owners, insurers, and regulators that vessels are designed, constructed, and inspected to accept standards. Classing may be effective at filtering out unsatisfactory designers and builders, but the established standards do little to weed out subpar vessel operators. Now comes the important part. The vast majority of marine and aviation accidents are a result of operator error, not mechanical failure. And that is actually his argument why he didn't look for certification. Can anybody see what's wrong with that? I mean, overconfidence, yes, maybe. What? Confirmation bias? Yeah, maybe. Default? No, the default is actually to look for certification if you want to spin it like this, right? No. Anybody else? Joshi? Just scream it.
It occurs to me that the vast majority of accidents are the result of operator error. That might be because most vessels are inspected, and that makes the like they don't have physical problems because they got inspected.
Exactly. So it's the survivor bias, right? Like you compare like different sets of populations. Like, of course, most of the errors are operational errors because they were all certified. So there couldn't be any. I mean, it is less likely to have accidents because of mechanical failure, right? And it's actually like quite ridiculous to say that because they are comparing different sets of populations. What are we maybe prone to what problem have we maybe now discussing this? The hindsight bias, right? Like now it's obvious, of course, this is a problem, but maybe it is only obvious because we can actually see in retrospective. And the hindsight bias is actually the common tendency for people to perceive past events as having been more predictable than they were. Yeah.
So I don't think that assumption is correct, that they are checked, because the insurance industry in aviation makes sure that they don't have to pay because of operator error. So it always comes to operator error, then the machining error.
Okay, like if you believe that the system is rigged and like actually...
No, I'm not saying system is rigged. I'm just saying that it is very hard to say something like so many failures happened with SpaceX, so many failures happened with NASA, so many failures happened somewhere else. 28 times the submarine went down. So he was right 28 times and one time he lost his life. So that's like when we made Titan, it failed the first time around. So when you say aviation, we are right now on confirmation bias because that's agreeing with our knowledge. Oh, it went down. So how is that not confirmation bias? This information doesn't qualify. He should have gotten certifications and everything, but just because that fact that you're saying there, the vast majority of marine accidents are a result because everything gets checked, they could be negligence too.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can follow. I think, so that is the blog post of the CEO, right? Like he wrote that. Yeah. And I think if you follow the general like strain of thoughts here, the survival bias is quite obvious, right? I mean, you cannot say that, of course, there's like almost no mechanical failures. This is why I don't seek certification. Comparing your ship that has no certification with all the ships that have. That is the only thing that I want to say.